Good morning, everybody. Thank you for our MAC meeting. I'm going to go over just a little bit of housekeeping here before we actually get started, and then we'll take roll call to get started. So just so people know, we are recording this meeting. We will post the recording later once the meeting is over. For guests, if you're participating online, we ask that you keep yourself muted, and then we'll have a public comment period towards the end if you want to actually address MAC members. In the meantime, if we have a speaker and you have a question for them, if you can chat your question in, we will raise it up for you. If we do it this way, just to keep the flow of the meeting going. If you are participating by phone, you can press *6 to unmute yourself and then *6 to remute yourself. And I think that that's all we have. So, Matt, do you want to take roll call?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Roll call. Trustee Hunter. Here. Commissioner Old. Here. Councilwoman Fenderbosh.
Here.
Trustee Weiss.
I'm not a trustee.
Oh, you're not.
Paul Wise is here.
Paul Weiss. It said it lists you on our website that way.
Are you not interested?
I'm an administrator.
Okay.
I will change
Paul
that.
Weiss.
He's a gentleman that makes everything.
That's right.
Confused everybody with titles and stuff. Beth Bigman Dreamer.
Here.
Marcy Kress.
Here.
Kelly Bensman. Kimberly McConville.
Here.
Michael Deneen.
Here.
Steve Sargent.
Here.
Alex Bernke.
Here.
Ryan Winter.
Here.
Eric Palmer.
Here.
Definitely important.
We have any more housekeeping or any?
No.
Good morning, everybody. Appreciate you making time this morning. And the county commissioner's office here for letting us come here. It is easier to get in and out, at least in my opinion, it is. We've got some things to do here today, going over just some informational pieces like we usually do. We've got a couple of conversations to have about the grants program, and then we're going to revisit some conversation that I think I started a long time ago, along the same lines of improving what we have in a universally beneficial manner. In this particular case, on recycling communication, I guess is one way to say it. And continue with our goal of this group of moving forward without contention, because there are plenty of things to move forward on that don't have contention. So with that, I believe we need to move to our administrative business to start with. We've got old minutes that need to get approved.
Chairman, I move that we approve the November 16th, 2022 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Wise.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
First on our agenda, we have we try to invite solid waste districts to come and present to MAC just so you can get an idea of the range of things that people do, kind of circumstances that they deal with. And today we have Brad. Brad, I always mispronounce your name. Is it Petrie or Petrie?
It's Petrie.
Petrie. I apologize for that, Brad. Brad is here with the Miami County Solid Waste District, and he's going to give us an overview of their district. So, Brad, if you're ready to share your screen, go ahead.
Just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, we can see that.
All right. As Ernie said, I'm the solid waste. My name is Brad Petrie, and I'm the solid waste coordinator for the Miami County Solid Waste District. I have a presentation that I want to try to get through and give you guys some time for discussion at the end if you so choose. But this is a picture of the transfer station here in Troy, Ohio. The solid waste district is a single county district located in the southwest corner of the state, just north of Montgomery County. We have a total population of about 108,000. There's 3 larger municipalities that make up about 65% of the total population, with the remaining population residing in either one of the 10 villages or townships. The Miami County Solid Waste District was formed in 1968. Actually, it was formed first as the Miami County Garbage and Refuse Disposal District, But then in February of 1989, became the Miami County Solid Waste District. There is flow control in the county, and we flow control the municipal solid waste, industrial solid waste, and commercial solid waste. As we said, we started in 1968 with an incinerator that was capable of processing 150 tons of solid waste in a 24-hour shift. With EPA standards in 1974, the incineration was stopped and the facility was converted into a transfer station. This building was again used as a transfer station until 1988, when our current facility was erected. It was then demolished in 1999. I asked the question, somebody really did pick those colors for that. So,
Hey, Brad.
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, it looks like you're sharing the preview version of your screen. So we're seeing your next slide. Are you able to switch over to full screen there?
Duplicate slide.
Good.
Oops.
There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you, Brad.
No problem. Thanks for the heads up. So the Miami County Transfer Station is constructed as a top load transfer operation with approximately 34,000 square feet. We receive and transfer an average of 425 tons of solid waste daily, and we're open to commercial and residential haulers. Just a quick slide of some of the pictures of inside the transfer station. You have the loader there kind of working on the face of on the tipping floor, as well as this bottom kind of middle center picture where there's an aerial view of the backside of the transfer station and some of the operations that we have there too. So with the transfer station itself, we've seen since we actually looked at 2011 to 2021. And from 2011 to 2021, we more than doubled the amount of users of the facility. We went from about 45,000 users to about 95,000 users on a yearly basis. So some things that we've had to do is we're constantly watching, the tonnages in the trailer. We're wanting to try to maximize the amount that we can get in each trailer. And the way that we've done that is to offer some additional equipment inside the building to be able to do it. As you can kind of see, just as a quick view there, I mean, last year alone, we were up over 1,701 transactions, just people that are using the facility over 2021. So we know that people are going to continue to haul their own trash. So we use the wheel loader and an excavator to obtain the averages. And we on every trailer that went out of our facility in 2022, we averaged 23.2 tons. The excavator has added to the efficiency in obtaining our goals, and it has a rotating grapple that allows us to add or remove solid waste from the trailer. We use a drop and hook process with our hauling contractor. A trailer can be weighed in, out, loaded, tamped, tarped, and unhooked in about 15 minutes. I put in here, we can do this at least 4 times an hour. We can do it faster than that if needed. So with the public hauling their own trash, we had to have a way of how we can handle that. Drop-off 1 that you see bottom left was constructed in 2016 and is utilized by our residents without trailers. While drop-off 2, which is 30-yard roll-off boxes that are kind of set below grade a little bit, not grade, but they're built up so that people aren't throwing up, 6 feet in the air. That was constructed in 2005, and it was used by our vehicles with trailers. Realizing that you have anybody that has a transfer station, anybody that has seen somebody haul their own trash, they always have challenged loads. What we do is we have this flex space there in front of the Traco that we can use for these problem loads. So when somebody comes in, they have a trailer load of roofing, we're able to put them in here where we can get them to where it's just not it's not impossible for them to unload their solid waste. It's also the same area that we'll use for the transloading of our recyclables, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I mentioned the drop and hook system. Again, this is kind of the back aerial view of the transfer station. The arrow is pointing to the loaded trailers. So these are the ones that we've had come through the transfer station. And you can actually see to the right or to the left of those, the empties that we have. So it's just a continual process that we continue to work around this facility. I'd mentioned drop off 1, and that's kind of highlighted there with the arrow, where people with the residents without trailers are able to unload their solid waste. Drop off 2 here is where all of the vehicles with the trailers would be going. And then the drop off 3 is just simply inside the building. one of the things that the operations manager has worked really hard to do is try to create a one-stop shop for for residents. So we offer latex paint disposal where we solidify that latex paint. We also have a light bulb recycling program, an electronics recycling program, propane tank recycling, bulk metal recycling, tire recycling, and wood waste recycling, all here at the actual facility. This is just a brief video. When we talk about one-stop shop, not only did we try to go one-stop shop, but we tried to put this in a way that was linear, where people weren't backing. So this was all in the idea of just trying to keep things flowing as easy as possible. What you can see is there's a scale there to the left that is a single or weighs by the pound that we use for our household hazardous waste. You can see, simple as it is, the cart that we use for the paint drop off. There's some storage barrels for the HHW program that hadn't started yet. There's the light bulb recycling, the lead acid battery recycling, electronics recycling, as well as the propane tank recycling there too. We do offer a household hazardous waste drop-off. Those collections are from April through September each year. Transfer station staff mans each one of these events, and then we have a contractor that comes in when our household hazardous waste storage container is full. And we do have a nice explosion-proof shed that we're able to store that in. Typical events are about 20 vehicles, and we collect about 800 pounds for each event. Miami County does charge for the cost of the program, which is $1 per pound for disposal. This is kind of a neat program. In 2014, we had applied for an Ohio EPA grant for the glass consortium that was done in partnership with Rumpke. And in order for us to do that, we actually did an outreach where we have containers set, and you can see a container there in the bottom right, at local bars and restaurants. So what we have done in order to service those, we contracted with RT Industries, which works with the developmentally disabled. Each week, a driver takes 3 individuals to load these containers or the totes onto a trailer that they bring back to the transfer station. We have enough of these totes, they're able to just kind of trade them out. And then they bring, like I say, they bring the full ones back. The way that this is designed and the rate that they charge, not only are we doing something great for the community, but it's actually being done cheaper than we could do it ourselves. So it's I say at the bottom here, something to be proud of. It's something that we really are proud of. Recycling in Miami County, there's the 3 largest communities offer a non-subscription curbside recycling. Other villages and communities offer a subscription-based curbside recycling. And then there are 4 different choices for residents in the county that don't have access to curbside recycling for drop-off, to be able to drop off their recycling. And this is a picture of the drop-off here at the transfer station. So we also have a mix of governmental and commercial haulers. So there's 2 municipalities that haul their own, which is Piqua. Actually, it's 3. It's Piqua, Covington, and West Milton now. Rumpke handles the recycling for the city of Troy as well as Tip City. Again, there's the public drop-off in West Milton. The other municipality, as well as most townships, have a choose-your-own policy for waste and recycling haulers, keeping in mind that a minimum of 65% are going to be under some sort of agreement through their municipality. All curbside and recycling in Miami County currently goes to Rumpke's facility in Cincinnati, which is great for messaging because what goes in the bin, those rules are the same all the way across the county. There's no miscommunication or mixed communication. The county-owned recycling center is a public drop-off for residents wishing to recycle with unable to get, again, their curbside service. I talked about that flex space that we had, and this is an example of what we do with our recycling. So the city of Piqua, again, was at a point that it was going to become unaffordable to where they could keep their curbside recycling. So everybody kind of got their heads together, and what we've been able to do is we accept the recycling at the transfer station, where it's then transloaded into another trailer, combined with that of Covington as well as West Milton, and it's then sent to the MRF in Cincinnati. And this is just kind of a pictorial collage here of that kind of process in action. Something that we've also tried to do, especially with this initiative from Ohio EPA looking for cardboard, post-consumer cardboard specifically, there are a few loads that come to the transfer station that we've been able to identify that do come in as mostly cardboard. What we've been able to do is when we see those, we're able to pick through those loads and generally those are pretty clean to where we're able to bale those and we're able to put that back into the mills. Something that's relatively new and something that we have been trying to do, but it's worked out pretty well for us so far. This is just an example of a promotional flyer that we put out. It's two-sided color. That we hand this out to all of the government entities that choose to use it. With the city of Piqua having their own recycling program, they elect to use these. We kind of beat the cost of the direct mail because we were able to give these flyers to these municipalities. They put them in with their utility bills, and they get handed out to every utility address in their respective town or village. So we do a little bit more bulk recycling. In 2020, we had this new manual tie baler that we had that we use for our aluminum and our cardboard cans. Excuse me, our aluminum and our cardboard. And this is just an example of what those bales look like. And this manual tie baler has actually allowed us to get a much tighter, much nicer bale. For businesses in Miami County, it's a challenge with any solid waste district, but all of the businesses in Miami County have the opportunity, well, I should say most of the business have the opportunity to select their own waste and recycling contractors. Many of our schools and businesses, apartment complexes have negotiated their waste haulers for a reduced rate on recycling pickup. In some cases, they're replacing that trash yardage with recycling. The scales at the transfer station, I realize it seems like a misplaced slide here, but we do have a total of 3 scales, 1 inbound and 2 outbound. The 1 outbound scale is completely automated and allows customers the ability to pay by credit card and exit without any interaction from the scale operator. A typical transaction can be completed in and out in about 8.3 minutes. That includes the time for them to unload. On a Saturday, we have the ability to process about 90 transactions an hour. And when I say 90 transactions an hour, that's just counting the outbound. That does not include the inbound, where you do physically have that touch. Regardless of how they weigh out, you have to weigh somebody in. We actually did the math on that with the amount of transactions we had. We were doing a transaction for every hour that we were open of every day, every 2.2 minutes. Since we have the flexibility with this recycling center, we actually have this pay-as-you-throw program where we're able to offer 30-gallon trash bags that can be purchased at the scale house for $6 for 5 bags, which includes the disposal. Disposal in our county-owned recycling drop-off. Disposal is in our county-owned recycling drop-off and encourages users of the program to recycle. At this point, because you're not paying for that, you are paying for the waste, but by not paying by the pound, it really does encourage you to pull that waste out of the stream. So some of the programs that the Solid Waste District is into, we sponsor a grant through the municipal court system for $20,000 that allows offenders the opportunity to collect roadside litter to pay off their fines with the courts. We also do a billboard campaign where the students are able to design their own billboard. We have the contest just ended February 1st, and we're going to have these up for Earth Day. And this is just an example of previous year winners. We also participate in the annual Tabapalooza contest with local school districts collecting pop tabs for recycling. We offer prizes for the top 3 buildings that participate. Each Christmas season, the Solid Waste District also sponsors a recycled ornament contest in which students from each grade submit an ornament made from recycled or repurposed materials. And believe it or not, those were all 3rd grade submissions on your screen. So just as a quick synopsis here, how much do we throw away? In 2019, there was 101,204.63 tons that passed through the transfer station, or 5.03 pounds per person per day. Per our annual district report, we reported 123,252.18 tons of recycling for a total of 224,456.81 tons, or an average of 12.51 pounds per person per day. That includes all of the municipal solid waste, industrial, as well as commercial waste too. We went through that fast, but I will also entertain any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate that.
Brad, I was just curious, have you benefited from
any EPA grants for recycling or litter abatement? And do you have plans to apply for any grants in the future?
The most recent grant that we applied for was in 2014, which was the GLASS initiative with Ohio EPA. We, as a solid waste district, don't have anything on the docket. However, we have recently reached out to our Miami County Safety Council as an opportunity for us to get in front of businesses to potentially sponsor a market development grant.
Brad, what's your tipping fee at the transfer station? Is it flow control in Miami County? I believe it is.
It is flow controlled. Right now, it's $49.05 per ton. And then we also charge $4.75 for the Ohio EPA fee, making it a total of $53.80 per ton for in-district waste.
Brad, this is Chet Cheney. You mentioned something about cardboard. Was that in relation to the cardboard project we recently coordinated?
No, this was kind of this waste was identified just before that.
Okay.
But it's been something that, as you know, with having the flexibility of having that baler, whenever we are able to capture that cardboard, we try to do that. The operations manager, Scott, sitting here with me, before we started the meeting, I said, I don't want to create the illusion of a dirty MRF. We're not there. These are just something that are clean loads that we're able to kind of segregate to be able to bail and try to get back into that to the mills.
They bring those clean loads to us. We do not charge them a tipping fee on that material as long as it's pretty clean.
And that was Scott Pence that kind of jumped in there too. I don't know if you'd heard that or not.
Are your recyclables flow controlled as well?
No.
Or
Brad, this is Ernie. For the cardboard loads that you get, are those coming in from businesses, or where is the cardboard coming from?
That's coming from on the industrial side.
Okay, thank you.
And then in addition to the drop off that we have here on site too. So we have expanded. It always used to be a residential drop off. And it still is for all intents and purposes, but we do have some businesses that are users of that cardboard bin. Just with the initiative and the end of the flexibility. I mean, our recycling drop off is 100 yards from our baler. So it's really just comes down to making sure that we have the time to bale and process that cardboard. But we've become accustomed to that, and we're pretty much handling it as it comes in at this point too.
Yeah, Brad, I think the cardboard project that Steve Sargent is, you offer something that we've talked about with the project, is that people have these large refrigerator boxes and TV boxes. Where do they go with these? And it sounds like you've got the great alternative for them in your community. And you don't charge them for that, correct?
Correct. We're sticklers on the styrofoam.
Yeah.
But we have, by having that facility or having the recycling center at our facility, that not only gives us access to that baler, it also gives us access to heavy equipment that if it's a windy day and the truck's tied up, we can throw somebody in a backhoe that can go down there and compact that cardboard to where it's not going to be an issue. You have staff that's here on site. It's inside of our gated facility that we close those gates at 6 p.m. on the evenings. So you're not going to get the contamination. It's also under cameras, so there's for what we're trying to do here, it suits us very well.
Brad, this is Beth. I have a quick question for you. You mentioned the cardboard coming in is at no cost. Do you charge this for the single stream material that's brought in from either your communities or by your residents for drop off?
So the drop off that we have here at the transfer station, we do not charge for. The communities that are bringing the material to us, we do charge a nominal fee for. That helps us to offset the cost of putting material into the trailers to get it loaded. And there was a time that, and there has been times even recently, that there's a cost to the county to to recycle the material, excuse me. There is a cost for us to recycle that material at times. So it tries to help to offset that cost and keep the program solvent.
Do you mind sharing what that current cost is for the recyclables per ton?
Right now we're charging $25 per ton.
Thank you.
Do you have to do any special preparatory work for those propane tanks? You have to take the valves off. Those have been a challenge for the industry.
No, we actually have a company up north of us that actually recycles those tanks and refurbishes them. We haul them to them and they take them free of charge from us just to get rid of them. It hasn't been an issue for us.
Brad, who is that company? Yeah.
Billy's Custom Propane Tanks. No, well, we may have to get that information and I can forward it to Ernie.
Sunrise, I believe, is the name of the company.
Yeah.
And they're up by Salina.
Sunrise.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Brad, I was hoping you could expand a little bit on that program where you combine the recyclables for Piqua and West Milton and Covington. You're essentially using your transfer station as a recycling transfer station. And are they put into an 18-wheeler? I don't know, just talk about the logistics of it a little bit. I think it's pretty interesting.
Sure. So, one thing we have is space. I mean, we're maxed out on space. So we kind of have an understanding with these municipalities. We'll just use Piqua, for example. Piqua, has a pretty much a window of when they're coming in. They're actually so courteous as to actually call us and give us about a 15-minute heads up when they're bringing the material to us, which allows us to take that flex space that we're using and have that cleaned, to be able to bring something to where we're not contaminating that recycling when we dump it onto the tipping floor. It's also done in a place that's different and separate from the actual, working phase, if you will. And then working phase, we're not in the landfill, but we're in a place that we're able to do that. We're also able to, as we work our way and we transload that material with that Traco, we're able to kind of look through and find contaminants, and we do pull some of these bags and things like that out that in the name of trying to give them, the material recovery facility the cleanest material possible. For the other communities that use it, Piqua is daily. These other communities, are a couple days, that before they bring material in. But again, we work around that flex space and try to make the most of what we can do with that. Does that answer your question?
Sure. So they are put onto an 18-wheeler?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry. Yes. We loaded onto a 53-foot semi.
Let me stay with that question. The recycling, the transportation cost of recycling is really the kill. So I see you're averaging 23 tons a load on MSW, but what's your average load weights on your recycling material going into Cincinnati?
We average 15. We've had heavier loads than that, but we're getting about 15 tons. We're happy with that number.
Oh yeah, it's hard because you've got plastics and it's hard. Yeah, but
yeah. If you have a lot of milk jugs, it's not 15 tons.
Brad, is your staff on the floor your staff, district staff, or contracted staff?
Yeah, that's one thing. So this is the Miami County Transfer Station is government owned and government operated. So the only thing that we subcontract is the landfill and hauling. So obviously we don't own the landfill and we don't own the hauling contractors. We own switch tractors that we use to kind of yard dogs, if you will. We own 2 roll-off trucks, but we don't own any of the trailers that are associated with the hauling.
It's a great layout. You keep the residential customers out of that tipping floor, and that's huge.
Yeah, and that was something, Montgomery County had 2 transfer stations, and they had a north facility, and we, that drop-off one that I showed you, that was kind of the gas station canopy, if you will. What we're able to do is we're able to load directly into the trailer. And by doing that, we've been able to pull those residents out of the building. We actually added an additional dumping bay, if you will, for those, we had 3 inside the building. Now we have 4 up there on top of the hill with the additional 6 at that drop off that's, that we showed you with the 30-yard roll-off containers. So we've created a lot more access to be able to do that, all in the name of trying to get some more space inside that building to be able to work. And it's just safer all the way around.
We take a lot of pride in getting our customers in and out in a timely fashion. On Saturday, we'll see 400 to 500 customers within a 4-hour time period. We try to keep under that 10 minutes, and we take it very seriously. Anything we can do to improve our efficiencies of doing that, we've done it with our from our scale software to the canopy to our overflow areas for the drop-offs too, for the residents.
We have the ability, this past year, we upgraded our scale software. So it's now encrypted, which, we needed to be a long time ago, but everything is encrypted, but we still have the ability to be able to process a transaction within about 30 seconds, an outbound transaction. If there's money involved and there's a change, undoubtedly somebody wants to come in and write a check. But if it's a credit card transaction, we can do that in under 30 seconds.
Gentlemen, it sounds like a very well-run operation. Appreciate your time today. We're going to keep on schedule, but I'm not sure if you're going to stick around, but you're more than welcome to air the rest of the meeting if you have time.
Thank you,
Sure.
Brad. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. If anybody thinks of any other questions beyond that, Ernie has my contact information. Matt will have my contact information. Feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they'd be happy to forward those questions around.
Yeah, Brad, if you don't mind sending me your PowerPoint, then I can share it with MAC members also.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Thank you for your time.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So next on the agenda, we have Michelle Baltz from the Hamilton County Art Resource. I think that's how you say it. Is that right? Michelle, did I get that right?
You just say it like resource.
Just resource? Okay. And they recently had a study done for diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're in the process of updating their plan, and they did this study as part of the plan. And Michelle is going to give us an overview of their efforts with that study. So thank you, Michelle. And we can see your screen.
Great. All right, do you see the regular slideshow and not the preview?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, it is.
great. So
Time out.
It is the preview.
it is the preview?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel for you, Brad. This is hard. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare. Did that work?
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you so much for having me. I'm with Hamilton County Resource down in Cincinnati. We used to be Hamilton County Recycling and Solid Waste District. And I am in the middle of my slide point presentation, so I'm going to scoot back to the beginning. I'm going to talk about a piece of our solid waste plan where we hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. But before I get too much into that, I want to kind of explain to you where we're at in the planning process so you can have an idea of that. We just finished our 30-day public comment period and had our public hearing yesterday, which means that it is time for the policy committee to decide whether finish up the plan, put those public comments in, and decide if it's time for ratification or not. So we have a meeting actually today of the policy committee, or they may decide to meet in May, or they may decide to hold a special meeting in April. But at some point in the next few months, they're going to start the 90-day ratification period. And just to give you an idea of kind of what Hamilton County looks like, we have, sorry about that. We have 48 political jurisdictions within the county. Obviously, the city of Cincinnati is the largest. They have about a third of our population. But we have very diverse communities and populations. We have urban, suburban, rural. It's a kind of unique county in that perspective. And so we really, in addition to hiring a solid waste consultant, we really wanted to hire a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant. We wanted to evaluate our programs and make sure that from a DEI perspective that we were meeting our goals and that we were reaching all of our audiences, basically. So we hired Rice Education Consulting. They go by Redcon, and I put Rico's contact information up there if anybody was interested in reaching out to them. They are based out of Hamilton County, but they actually work all over the country. We also, one of the things they created for us was a full DEI report, which is actually separate from our plan that we have on our website. But then we also incorporated most of that text as an extra appendix in our solid waste plan. And I'll go over the 5 deliverables that we ended up asking for when we put out the RFP. So honestly, all of this was very new territory for me. And it was very hard to know even what to ask for in an RFP. But luckily, Hamilton County has an economic inclusion office. And so I worked with that director. And we met several times to go over, kind of what we were trying to do. And he gave me ideas of what deliverables would be most helpful. He was really big on leaning on the DEI consultant to encourage stakeholder input. So making sure that we were reaching audiences and getting that input early on in the plan so that we would have that and to kind of build our plan off of. So these were the 5 deliverables that we asked for, and I'll go over each of them. First was evaluating current programming. We have dozens of programs, but we couldn't ask them to review them all. We just didn't have that much money. So we asked them to review 5, and we chose 5 programs that kind of represented different types of programming, different audiences, so that we could go through that evaluation process with them and then evaluate the others. So we chose our technical assistance for schools and work. We chose multifamily recycling, our household hazardous waste drop-off, and our residential recycling campaign. The main takeaway for that was that we needed to measure more demographic data. One of the challenges that they had was in evaluating our program, they said, well, you're not tracking the race or the gender or anything else when you're having these programs. So we can't tell you how well you're doing in reaching different audiences. So one thing we've already started doing is doing a better job of tracking and just asking questions that have become so common when you're filling out any kind of registration or evaluation. And we don't require that people answer those, but we're just trying to collect that data. So the second thing that we did was evaluate the staff training. And we really felt like this was important because staff are creating programs and reaching audiences and making decisions. So we really wanted to make sure that they were getting the right training that they needed. And overall, what they found was staff were taking some really great courses. This was really important to the majority of the staff, but there wasn't a lot of uniformity. So, they were just taking what classes were available. We didn't have requirements beyond, the basic county requirements of what classes that they would take. So, this was one thing that they really stressed was, have an intentional curriculum that people are going to take, and make sure that one of the things was a lot of what our staff was taking was focused on race. But there are a lot of other parts of DEI that they weren't focusing on. So making sure that we're getting all kinds of different training, diverse training on diversity. So the other thing that they did was help us encourage stakeholder input. So they reached out to other organizations. They introduced us to the NAACP, which we're still in contact with, and they've been posting all of our jobs on their social media or policy committee positions on social media. They've been a great partner. But one of the big things they did was help work with our solid waste consultant, who was really in charge of stakeholder input, to form a minority business enterprise focus group. And so this focus group had small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and it was a virtual focus group because it was in COVID times, and really looking at what are their needs, what are their interests, what are the barriers do they have that are unique, and how can we best reach out to them. So one of the big takeaways is that there are already existing groups out there that we can tap into to help get the word out if we're intentional about it. The next thing they did was evaluate new programs. So through the planning process, we came up with some new programs or tweaking old programs, with changes. So we really wanted them to look at that and see, is there anything in the construction of this program that we can alter to make it better? And I think that they really pushed us to seek community input when planning a program. Which is not something that we necessarily do. We'll reach out to communities different, and not necessarily communities as in like political jurisdictions, but communities as in like social communities. Reach out to people to get their input while the plan is in progress, so they can have input on, what time it starts, or those kinds of things. That's harder to do than just coming it up with it in our office, but having that stakeholder input is important to making sure that we have the best program. And finally, they created a final report for us. Like I said, that's available on our website. They also gave a presentation to our policy committee. So in the big report that they included lots of additional things, which are almost like educational, like a racial lens framework and other pieces that they felt were really important for us to consider in our plan. So another thing that came out, which was part of that final report, was developing these 5 DEI goals that we adopted. So this is not only in part of the appendix, but it's also in the chapters of our plan. And it really focuses on a lot of the things that I've already covered, but these are goals that we can have and that staff, new staff we can introduce to, but that we can always keep in the front of our minds. And this is my required follow us on social media page, and that is it. So I will stop sharing and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Michelle. From the RC.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? It's Marcy Press.
Hi, Marcy.
Gathering that demographic information, do you do it via paper, online? How do you get the information? Let's say you have an HHW day and you have 500 cards online. How do you gather that demographic information?
So with our HHW events, we require pre-registration. So we've included it as part of the registration. For our composting seminars, we've included it in the follow-up survey that we send them. So it's all been digital so far. We've not had to do any paper. We ran into a few challenges though with the data, like our school programs. We're not going to go around and ask the kids what their ethnicity is, or, it's inappropriate. So what we're doing with the schools, there are actually some pretty good demographic data statewide on schools just in general. So we might not be we might get the exact snapshot of the class that we presented to, but we can say this school has these demographics. So we've kind of come up with some creative ways with that.
Helpful, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions from the group?
I do. With the DEI report, were you surprised, or was something revealed that you didn't anticipate or you wouldn't have? Was there something major that would have been overlooked if they hadn't participated?
There were a few surprises. I thought we were doing pretty good on the trainings. And so when that came up that, there were a lot of improvements to be made on our trainings, that was a bit of a surprise. I was also surprised with the evaluation of our residential recycling campaign, because we were really intentional. We chose an African-American actor in the one main campaign that we did. We actually reached out and tried to make sure that we were hitting a lot of low-income communities in our mailer, and their evaluation didn't really reflect that we were doing all of those things because we weren't documenting it in an intentional way, I would say. So, their picture of that campaign was surprising to me, but then also really helpful to see, like, how could we document that and, and really pull out. So these are, the 5 communities we're going to hit with a mailer. These are the demographics of that community. And, and so that we have it more documented than just like in our head, we know these things.
is there anything in your plan that specifically came out of this other than some of I'm talking about from the solid waste management perspective, that kind of thing? Anything in your plan that directly came out of this?
Absolutely. So our household hazardous waste program, it's always been a thorn in our side anyway, because it's so expensive and we get so little tonnage out of it. But what they did evaluate was having a 1 day a year drop off that's available only on a Saturday that you have to drive to the location cuts out a significant portion of our population. So you have to have a car, you have to be able to drive to the location, you have to be off on a Saturday, which is something that, us folks who work all week don't really think about, but it did kind of open our eyes of, oh, we really need to rethink this program. It's not only cost inefficient for us from a solid waste perspective. We're reaching less than 1% of our population. It's very inaccessible. We're not reaching our elderly population. We're not reaching people who don't drive. So we've come up with a few solutions just this year. Or actually in late 2022, we had a 2-day event. So we had it open on Friday and Saturday. And we actually had more people come on Friday than we did on Saturday. So I think that, tweaking those things, this year we're planning on having a pilot where we work with communities to collect their household hazardous waste, similar to what Cuyahoga County does. We actually had some folks go up and visit Cuyahoga and spend 2 days learning from them. So we really are trying to make it more accessible to our residents. So if it's in your community, then it's going to be easier to get to than just some, area in the whole county. So we're trying to make that program more accessible as much as we can with our budget.
Thank you. Any other questions from the crowd here? Thank you very much.
I'd like to follow up on what you were talking about, the need to document things you were already doing as far as reaching out to communities you identified. Were you referring to the need to document for the person who is doing the study or just internally for planning purposes? I was just wondering where that related to.
Yeah, just internally for our own purposes, so we can have something to measure against. So we do performance measures for all of our programs, and so we have integrated DEI, different demographic performance measures into there as well now. So, this is new, so we're still trying to figure out what the baseline is so we can make improvements. But I mean, in an ideal world, all of the people who, come to our compost seminars, if we took a snapshot of that, it would reflect, the county as a whole, and population. So if we're able to document who that is that's coming, then we can measure it and say, okay, we need to improve, we need to reach out to this population, or everyone that's coming is retired. So maybe we need to rethink our compost seminars kind of thing. So just really, we can't improve it if we don't measure it. So it's really for our internal purposes.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. If you have time, we'd love for you to stay on and listen a little bit more. We've got some interesting conversation going on here now. We are actually on schedule, which is even better. I believe we have some PA updates now.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So first up on our agenda, we have another Michelle. We have kind of a standing topic here for rural updates that go around at EPA. So we have our favorite rules coordinator on here just to kind of give us a quick update of what she's frantically working on.
Yeah, you kind of stole the win from my sails. I was going to point out that I was, Michelle number 2, which is, I'm also twin number 2. So, pretty standard for me. Anyway, DMWIM rules, we don't have a whole lot going on right now, but the springtime is going to be our pickup period. So we're going to be trying to move forward with our solid waste landfill operations rule. We're going to be hoping to get that out for interested party comment this spring. We're also going to be pushing through the transfer facilities. This is, again, a solid waste transfer facility. rural package as well. That would also be an interested party package. So we really are, a lot of our packages right now are going to be in that interested party stage. And we're going to be looking for feedback from the community on what changes we should be making there. The only thing right now that we have at JCAR is the composting correction package. And if you've been following that, that is the correction of a siting criteria for class 2 facilities. We also threw in class 3 and class 1 facilities because there was some confusing language that was unclear on what the siting was. So we tried to correct that as well. As always, feel free to send me an email or give me a call if you have any questions, but I'll stop there unless there's a pet project you would like me to discuss.
Anybody have any questions for Michelle, number 2?
Michelle, what's going on with scrap tires these days?
So we're still working on getting those ready for JCAR. We're hoping to get them filed relatively soon, but it's a large package, as you all know, because you saw it go out for interested party. So getting all the forms necessary to submit to JCAR is the step we're still in right now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. As always, it's good
Bye.
to see you. Bye. So we have a few more EPA updates here. So the first one that we're going to go over is our drop-off anti-contamination campaign, and Matt's just going to give us a quick update of where we are at this point.
Sure. I'm hoping to see a press release related to that today. You was seeing some of the national publications. We did award 3 communities some money to move forward. I know there's been a lot of work behind the scenes with the recycling partnership in those communities, and they are the Ottawa, Sandusky, Seneca Solid Waste District, Athens, Hocking Joint Solid Waste District, as well as Mahoning County. So we're excited to see those start moving forward. I expect to see some action next month related to that. So definitely more to report at the next meeting.
And any questions about that project for Matt? Okay, so another project that we had been working on, and Brad mentioned this when he was giving his presentation, is our cardboard recovery initiative. So you'll recall that we were working with 3 of the paper mills in Ohio to try to figure out ways of improving cardboard recovery. We held meetings between the paper mills and solid waste districts. We had meetings with each of the 3. So on January 30th, we met with Pratt out of Wapakoneta. We had 11 solid waste districts who participated in that meeting with them. On February 1st, we met with Integrity Paper for their plant in Akron, and we had 10 solid waste districts that participated in that meeting. And then February 6th, we had our meeting with Bright for their plant in Massillon, and we had at least 10 districts participate in that one. Some of them were overlap between Integrity because they're both in the same area of the state. So we've had multiple solid waste districts at least be in touch with them. I know of at least one that has entered into a project with them. We're going to be reaching out to the mills here again very shortly so that we can kind of make sure that if anything else we can facilitate, we will be happy to do that. At this point, though, we had kind of taken a step back to let them talk with the solid waste districts. We're going to be back in touch with the districts so we can find out what projects actually are happening so we can try to track what's going on. And we're still open to any other kind of pilot projects that we can help to facilitate. So I'll have more news in terms of actual projects that have taken off at the next meeting.
What types of projects are you talking about, Aaron?
I know for the Richland County Authority, they have, for their cardboard, I believe that they're now working with Greif on getting it to Greif as opposed to transporting it to wherever they were going before, and I'm not sure where that was. So but for the most part, we haven't been in the loop at this point in terms of what's going on between the mills and the districts because we had kind of taken a step back. So, but Bright in particular is interested in talking to the district in the entire state rather than just up in northeastern Ohio. So we may be facilitating further discussions with them as well.
Steve and Beth may have some, I think, examples that may have been discussed, but they were leading that project.
Just one comment that we tried to promote to the districts, please ask. These corporations are willing to get involved at a level you may not expect them to agree to. If it's a baler to transfer, if it's a piece of equipment to transfer roll-offs, we put everything out there. And hopefully we sparked that, but to Ernie's point, we wanted to back away from that discussion, so we weren't the third wheel when they need to talk to them directly, but I think that would agree. Those mills were interesting.
The mills were very interested, and I think the solid waste districts too, because, you know, we had several solid waste districts respond that, you know, they're looking for square footage, you know, what could they manage on, you know, their properties, that kind of thing. So,
Were any of the solid waste districts looking to work together? Because they're big enough to justify a whole.
not that I'm aware of, that doesn't mean that there haven't been conversations.
Just recently, I put Pike County Solid Waste District, which is down in southeastern Ohio, in touch with. So we'll hear what they have to say about that.
Greif actually has facilities north, Dayton, and also Cincinnati. So they could, to Ernie's point, they can cover the whole state. So everybody's included in this concept if they want to participate.
So hopefully I'll have a better update for you in terms of projects that are actually happening.
Is there gonna be anything that is gonna come out of that, hopefully, that we could publicize the regular, long-term all at the same time, but how the rubber meets the road, I guess, would be the best way to say that. Just,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, based on, you know, what we learned from the districts in terms of what actually has happened, or maybe from the mills. I'm not sure which voice it will come from, but yeah, for sure. Once we know exactly the projects that have taken off, you know, it may be a situation where we need to step back in and help facilitate something like a hub through our grant program. Who knows if they want to put in an application next year or something like that. You know, those are all kinds of things that we can talk about with them.
Ernie, could you spell the last,
Right?
Greif? I thought you said Greif.
It's GREIF.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I mean, what we hope to have for you is basically a spreadsheet of those mills and those solid waste districts that have at least gotten to step one with a project, what that project kind of entails on the higher level. And if there are any needs, either on the mill side or solid waste district side, as far as whether it's grant money or trying to combine with other solid waste districts or whatever the case may be, some needs as well on that spreadsheet. And if there are grant funding needs, then obviously we're going to involve DEPA in that conversation to get them in tune with the mills and the solid waste districts so that they can look at that going forward.
Ms. Laney?
Yes, so just a few quick things here. I think I sent you an email to let you know that the legislative report went to the General Assembly on December 8th. We never hear anything about it, so that may be a good thing, or either that or it's sitting on somebody's desk who really knows. We do have some terms expire on July 1st of this year, so Alex, Chuck, yours expires, Jennifer, Steve, and Michael all will need to reapply if you're interested. I will forward the information to you about how to do that. And then our next meeting is May 17th. So that will be here at this building again. And then the only other thing I was going to mention that is I'm now on SWANA's board. I don't know who I replaced, but I'm now sitting on SWANA's board. So, and I for some reason volunteered myself to be secretary. I don't know why I would do that, but
You get volunteered or voluntold?
I volunteered.
Good for you.
So those are all the updates that I had at this point. The next, yes, Kimberly, I'm sorry, yes, go right ahead.
I want to keep us on schedule, Mr. Chairman, if I may have about 2 to 3 minutes for another update. House Bill 33 is our state biennial budget bill. Some of you are very involved in that process. Others of you luckily don't have to read almost 3,000 pages to see what's in that thing. The long and short of it is, in my review of the budget bill, I discovered language that Ohio EPA placed in the executive budget. It's in the as introduced version of House Bill 33. That basically diverts part of the funding for the grants program to a different division within EPA for a non-grants purpose. In other words, taking grant money to subsidize staffing and regulatory activity of a different division. This is deeply concerning it should be concerning to all of us. Number one, EPA did not bring that idea before MAC. There was no discussion. I suspect there was no discussion with the grants division.
And this sets a very bad precedent. This recycling and litter prevention grant has been around for a couple of decades. It used to be situated at the Department of Natural Resources. And when discussions arose about moving that program from DNR to EPA, industries like mine, the retail merchants, the grocers, the Wholesale Beer and Wine Association, waste haulers, all of us told EPA and ODNR that we thought that was a very bad idea because the grants program didn't seem to be a natural fit in a very regulatory agency. We were proven wrong for many, many years because EPA seemed to embrace the grants program. And they situated it within DEPA, which is their kinder, gentler division, for lack of a better term, that helps people and doesn't bust them for violations. I'm just putting this in English though. So we were clicking along pretty well. It's been a bit frustrating that the appropriation authority for the grants has been very low. And lo and behold, that fund balance was building and building and building. And even I was shocked to hear that it's about $18 million by the end of FY23. Now, it gets $5 to $6 million a year. And as we all know, if we look at all the grant recipients, they send out grants between $4 and $5 million every cycle. So we have a gap, we have a big fund balance. And in the bowels of state government, funds with very high balances become very appealing, frankly, and you see this in local government too, right? They become appealing for little cash raids from other divisions. I believe that is exactly what is happening with this language. I wanted to state for the record my very strong opposition in my dismay, frankly, that EPA leadership did not bring it before MAC. We are charged statutorily for overseeing that grant program in an advisory capacity. So I suspect, besides me and Alex, none of the rest of you knew a thing about this. And again, good for you for not having to read the budget bill. It's not a great task. So I also want to point out that high fund balance, again, it's going to be $18 million by the end of FY23, was rated in fiscal year 18. I'm going to take you back in my time machine before the pandemic to the rate on that fund under a different EPA director. A good deeds cleanup, $500,000 was taken from the grant funding. $3,250,000 paid for the cleanup of Arco and East Cleveland. Now, did these sites need to be cleaned up? My God, yes. In fact, my industry helped pay for part of the good deeds cleanup. And I won't say we were happy to do it, but we recognized it had to be done because all of our stuff that was supposed to be recycled was attracting all kinds of bad stuff in Dayton. So we wanted to do the right thing. Again, I have to stress how appalling it is that a grants fund can be rated for cleanup purposes when the EPA has 6 different ways to cover costs like that. They can do a lien on properties. They can ask the Attorney General to file a civil suit. They have a hazardous waste facility management fund that they can tap. They have a hazardous waste cleanup fund they can tap. They have an EPA remediation fund they can tap. And last but not least, they can get royalties, timber sales, and basically anything that's worth anything from these facilities to cover those costs. So I think what we have here are 2 issues. The rate on the fund and the very low appropriation authority that our grants fund suffers from. Now, EPA, in good faith, wants to raise the appropriation authority. You know, Michelle or Marie and I just had to talk about that. That's great. An additional $3 million is great, but I would call that a start. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of work to do on recycling in the state. We do a pretty good job. I mean, we're not the worst. We're certainly not the best, but we have so much potential with curbside expansion, all the way to small things that make a difference in a really small solid waste district, like buying balers, buying a truck. And many of you have benefited from these grants or you plan to benefit from them. I think it's time to take a stand, protect the grant program, and tell this other division at EPA to find a way to save their own costs. Thank you.
Yes. Can staff remind the group where the funding for this grant comes from?
I can probably do a better job than anybody. The funding comes from the construction demolition disposal industry, which is a tax, not a fee. Okay? The Construction Demolition Association does not have a position on this at the moment. Okay? Because last time they tried to increase our fees by 300% to fund the Soil and Water Conservation Districts because they were taking their funding away. We reminded them that it was a tax, not a fee, and they weren't allowed to do that. The legislature listened to us. Then. The grants program was funded by the tax prior to the construction demolition debris.
The franchise tax.
The franchise tax.
Corporate income tax.
Yeah, corporate income tax.
Which no longer exists.
Which no longer exists. When that ceased to exist, that's when they placed fee on the construction demolition industry. The $3.8 million cleanup that Kimberly spoke of happened to be for a construction demolition recycling facility that there were no rules in place for and that got way out of control. So you basically took funds out of the account that was funded by an industry to clean up problems with that industry. While I understand that there are other sources for funds and things of that nature, it is what it is. I completely, from a personal perspective, agree that we have a lot of work to do on recycling and things like that. I 100% think that it cannot be done on the backs of the construction demolition debris industry. Disposal of construction demolition debris waste is going to go down as we go forward. Recycling rates, as you go to the coast and where the value of disposal is more, is up in the 80s and 90% range. If we do that in the state of Ohio, it will decimate the recycling program. So, while I agree that taking money away from the recycling fund and program is not necessarily the best of ideas, it may be appropriate to start looking for alternative funding sources to do this properly going forward. I believe it's 50 cents per cubic yard and $1 per memory serves. And then, do you guys know what that volume number has done the last number of years?
We don't get reports in terms of how much material is disposed. We can only do it based on fees that are submitted to us. So we can back calculate and tell you how much is paid on, but we have no idea what's actually, we don't get any reports like we do for landfills.
It should be going up because of construction in the state of Ohio, but I don't necessarily know what it is.
I used to get that information submitted to USCPA on an annual basis. But it's been a few years since they stopped doing the state measurement program. I'm certain that can be gathered from Brian based upon the fees that we paid.
I have another. And staff and or Kimberly can answer that. What is the other area that is hoping to be the recipient of this money?
The Soil and Water Conservation Districts. So a decision was made internally. I'm assuming at EPA that they didn't want to divert any of the funding that's earmarked for soil and water. And again, I'm not advocating raising fees on the C&D industry, landfill tipping fees. I represent the private sector. And when we run out of money, we cut costs. And I know our legislature would be delighted to see a little belt tightening. We have a governor who wanted to throw a third of the administrative code in the trash. he and Lieutenant Governor Husted believe there are too many administrative rules, so something is being lost in translation.
So they would take money out of our fund balance
Just our earmark, yep.
for Soil and Water Conservation District.
No, not, so right now, a piece of the C and D fees goes to the recycling grants and to soil and water. We each get a little slightly different share. This language would just chip away at the share earmarked for the grants. It would leave soil and water with their current portion.
Or are you asking where the,
I'm asking where that, there, you said they were gonna go raid the fund. Who is going to receive that money removed from our fund?
Donor.
It's 3 cents, right?
5.
5
And
cents.
It's 2.5 cents per cubic yard and 5
5
cents
cents per ton.
off of our share.
And it will be used for what?
Anything they want.
No,
In theory, the agency
It
is
just
saying it's going to be used
says,
for the
administration.
administration of the CD program.
Right.
That's my understanding.
Within the agencies.
Yeah.
within the agency, so that means payroll, that means staplers, that means whatever.
Kimberly, what's the timetable?
So it's the state budget, we have until the end of June
That's
to
what
get
they're trying to divert the funds up to pay for regulatory program on the industry. Okay, so that's why. The only other point of clarification I'll put to Kimberly is that from my memory of our charge here, our only legislative charge is to the state solid waste management. The grants program is at the invitation of the group.
That's not correct, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to officially also register my concern on behalf of the retail merchants. I think Kimberly summarized the issue quite well. And I think it speaks to the larger concern of the precedent that it would set, regardless of even what dollar amount we're talking about. And as a representative of the private sector who represents companies who pay some of these fees and taxes, for them to be made aware that these are being used for purposes other than what they're supposed to be used for is extremely concerning. And I'm hopeful that whether it be here or in a conversation with leadership at EPA, that we can get some clarity on why this is done or what the justification behind.
And in a small group of us, we'll be meeting with legislative leadership at EPA next week. So we did want to meet with Director Vogel, but God love her, she's really busy right now. So.
I guess, you know, and speaking on behalf of the solid waste districts, I mean, based on the reports that you provide and we are kind of aware of year after year, and your request for funding to support, you know, activities of solid waste districts that are in direct response to the state plan, you know, expansion of recycling, production activities, you know, those funding requests far exceed what is available to be given. And, you know, even if you raised it by 3 million, I think you're still going to have requests in excess of that to, I think to put that whole process in jeopardy is going to be detrimental to solid waste districts. I mean, albeit Miami and Hamilton are well-organized examples that we saw today. There are lots of districts that are, you know, struggling daily. I guess I'm really disappointed that this didn't come to us. I mean, this directly impacts what we do. And I think solid waste districts would probably be supportive of not seeing any changes.
As a recipient of the grant, of one of the grants for our township, I think it's beneficial that that program keeps funded fully because it promotes everything we want to do here. We just got our numbers from Rumpke in the past month or so that said Genoa Township alone, Rumpke has collected over 1 billion pounds or something a year in recycling. Genoa Township is up to 4 million pounds a year of recyclables. And I attribute that to the grant aided that. More people are using those larger totes. So I think cutting off that funding source would cut off one of the goals that we are using to promote on this committee. So that's my point.
That's it. Thanks.
Okay. So next on the agenda, we have, sorry, Marie, an update regarding our recycling and litter prevention grant program. And then also an update on the money that we're seeking from US EPA for the Swiffer and REO grants. So I get to share my screen and let's see how well this goes for me. So just a minute. Okay, thank you, Marie.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marie Barnett. I'm the grants administrator of the Recycle Ohio Grant Program. And I just wanted to give you a quick, brief update of the applications that we received. They were due February 3rd of 2023. We received 178 grant applications, 85 community and litter, 9 academic institution grants, 69 water bottle refilling stations, 10 market development grants, and 5 scrap tires. The total request was $8.3 million, and generally we fund anywhere between $4 and $4.5 million. This year, we do plan to go to the controlling board and ask for some additional funding because we do have additional money in the bank. We just don't have the authority to spend it, so we have to go back and ask for that. The 2023 grant timeline, we've just ended the technical review on March 10th. That means everybody that is a technical reviewer for our program, which is internal, reviewed the applications. And it just ended up last week on the March 10th. We have administrative and compliance reviews from March to April. That means we do an environmental check on everybody that's applied that we proceed to recommend to the director for funding. We make sure that they're in compliance with the EPA. They don't have outstanding debt to the state of Ohio in any capacity. And we just make sure that they're in compliance before we would award them any funding. We present with Director Vogel in early May, and we announce awards in late May or early June. And the projects, and the projects can start July 1. They're usually notified in the beginning of June, mid-June. We do the allocations for the funding. They sign grant agreements, and then we get them their money. Generally, it's 50% up front, depending what type of project you were awarded. You get 50% up front. If you're a market development or a scrap tire, an Ohio business, you get the money at the end. It's kind of like a reimbursement, if you will, meaning they have to send in all their invoices, proof of payments, and then we give them the money at the end of the project. And they generally have 2 years, where community and litter and schools have 1 year with their projects. And with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay, and she's going to talk about the US EPA grants that we have applied for, or going to apply for the Swiffer. I don't think it's due to April. Is that correct? Yeah. The REO grant and the Swiffer grant.
So last November, US bipartisan, part of the US bipartisan package, there was opportunities for grant opportunities. The first one was the Swiffer, which is the solid waste infrastructure for recycling. It was a non-competitive, every state and some of the territories were able to put their hat in for projects that range from $300,000 to $500,000. And eligible activities included developing and updating plans, develop and strengthen and implement comprehensive data that was more towards the national recycling goal and food waste reductions. And it is a very state support and state-led implementation of the plan. This information was released at the same time as their other grant, the REO, which was November the 15th. Yeah. And Ohio put our hat in our name in the hat for a Swiffer grant, which is for residential organic waste characterization study. The characterization study should provide insight into household behaviors that can be used to guide the development of outreach material customized in neighborhoods and addressing local changes and opportunities. There also, the comprehensive organics management plan will be updated, which lays out the flow of organic waste in Ohio, the opportunities and needs for reduction in management. And the programmatic factors were submitted on February 1st, and as Marie stated, this isn't complete. There's kind of like this back and forth piece. Since it's kind of more guaranteed funds, the US EPA, based on your proposal, will give you an amount. And then they're working on the negotiations of what our programs would look like. And that isn't complete until April. The other grant that the US EPA bipartisan package put out was a RIO grant. It's a recycling education and outreach opportunity. It was a very competitive grant. From projects could range from 250,000 to 2 million. There is approximately 25 grants that will be awarded across the United States, and there will be, and their goal is to release a minimum of 1 grant per each region. Ohio put an application in. Our application is for business recycling across Ohio. And it was for $1.038 million. And we will be working with solid waste districts and businesses across Ohio to increase collection of recyclables and improve markets for recycled commodities. I actually had the opportunity to work with Dave Foltz and DEPA to propose this application. And we joined with 13 other solid waste districts that are listed there to gather input. These 13 solid waste districts already have a business, some form of a business recycling program. And so we were able to take all of the positives from each of those districts and kind of morph it into an application. Our deliverable will be a toolkit where businesses can access best management practices. The toolkit will have some flexibility. Well, the priority is the flexibility so that it can be modified and be region specific. So it can, reflect communities' needs. And then a landing page on the website will combine a lot of efforts that are already done with businesses to encourage the incorporation of recycling. Thank you.
Apologize here for people who are participating virtually. We're back online. For once, it wasn't me.
Does anybody have any other questions while they're getting it back up?
But just to let you know about the Swiffer grant, I mean, there's another piece to the Swiffer grant application that still has to be asked for at this point by US EPA is program goals. And that has been approved by the director's office, submitted already. A work plan comes a little bit later for that, so staff will be working on that particular piece. And again, that's an allocation grant, for lack of better words, pretty much guaranteed if you ask for it. I believe there was only 1 state that did not ask for it, and perhaps 4 territories with the 49 states. So how that kind of is divided up, we'll have to see. This is a 5-year funding cycle in the sense that our understanding is they combine year 1 and year 2 together. I will tell you that anytime you put together a grant program, it's very difficult to try to get pieces and parts in place, because if you haven't done it before, you have to try to figure out what's the criteria, what is eligible, who's going to review it, what's their criteria for reviewing and making recommendations. And so US EPA admittedly had indicated that they were struggling with this process. It's new to them. And that's why they kind of combined year 1 and 2. So there'll be other opportunities for funding for years 3, 4, and 5. And we were intrigued by the business recycling activity of many of the solid waste districts, the 13 that you've seen up there, that we thought it was something also in our state solid waste plan that we don't pay enough attention to our business community. And so this was an effort to try to put together a package that would allow other solid waste districts to benefit from this, not just the 13 that was on the list, but others that may not have the resources or staff or expertise. Somehow we could come up with a toolkit, best management practices that we can kind of roll out across the state as well, and work with all 52 solid waste districts in some form or fashion, understanding that all 52 are unique and different, just like every county in the state is unique and different, whether they have a lot of money or not a lot of money, a lot of staff, not a lot of staff. So, but we'll be able to work hopefully with all of them in some way to benefit them. And sometimes, as Ernie says, if we can just, have folks move one step ahead, that's better than nothing. And so the incremental changes and improvements are important as we look at it across the state. So more to come on this. Unfortunately, I think we're having to wait for a little bit until summertime for us to get an answer from our good folks at US EPA.
Thank goodness Lindsay came along because I didn't want to do it. It was a lot of work and poor Lindsay was stressed out. So if you think applying for our grants is hard, try applying one at the federal level. So I figured that this was a test to figure out whether she was going to stay or not. And she made it through. So.
Well, to that point, I will tell you, it was a reminder for staff, those who have applied for our grants. It's easy for us to say, hey, the deadline's coming, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So for the very first time, in a long time, we were on the other side of this saying, hey, I think we need more time. They should give us more time. We should do this and that.
Is there an extension?
Yes, more extension. So we appreciate what you all go through to put together proposals for the grant program up in DEPA. And we just needed a learning opportunity for us to realize that again. So anyway, but staff did a wonderful job, and I'm hopeful that we'll be successful in this effort.
So next on the agenda, we're going to put Michael on the grilling seat here. He wanted to have some discussion in MAC about best practices for MRF communication. We've had this discussion several times. And as you heard Brad say, they're fortunate that all of their communities have one message to go on. So it's easy for them, but particularly when you're looking at a larger area, it's easy to get a lot of miscommunication. And so, Michael, I'll turn it over to you to lead that discussion.
So I think we had this discussion sitting in this room 6-8 months ago, something like that. And it's the idea of following up. It spurred out of the confusion, I guess is the proper way to say it, and the rapid deployment of some additional recycling capabilities at Rumpke, which is all great. It's wonderful. It's things that need to be done. But from the outside looking in, we've had a system in place since late 80s in the solid waste districts and how the communications ran, how the contracts are run. The idea becomes, should we be looking at this for the foreseeable future of how do we make this better? How do we really put the communication in line with today's world? It's not the same industry as it was 30 years ago. There's recycling that's happening because the operations are mature, if you will. To stay in operation, they have to recycle certain things. So you don't have to force people to do things quite the same way you used to. There's also, as we've learned through the contamination reduction grants, communication is key in all of this. If you don't educate everybody in one way, it gets lost. And then, as we've all played the telephone game, when you put it through one entity and then the next entity and then the next entity and the next entity, what you get out at the end is normally not entirely or at all the same as what you started with. And we have less staff, less money to do things with, less everything. So let's try to figure out how to not recreate the wheel, which is what we try to do with the change in the state plan on the industrial recycling rates and things like that, because we were spinning our wheels, not doing anything. So the question at hand is there a way, should there be a way to get that communication system to work in a better way, considering the MRF shed idea, considering where the solid waste districts and all the municipalities are? Maybe it's a repository for information so you don't recreate the wheel every time for each MRF. Maybe it's a streamlined message that we really kind of figured out what that was through the grants program anyways, through the contamination reduction program. I'm not sure what that is, but as new technologies are put in place, we want to encourage recycling of cardboard. We want to encourage recycling more plastics. We want to encourage the recycling of batteries through the curbside program so that we don't end up with buildings on fire all the time. There's a lot of things that we want to do, but those recycling of batteries is important. It goes to the right places. I think it was Steve that told us we have one of the biggest lithium recycling operations in the country in Lancaster. So utilizing that will be a great benefit, just like all the cardboard plants that we have here, the paper plants. So that's a 30,000 foot view, and that's about all I'm qualified to talk about. But do we as a group think that that is a statewide benefit that really should be looked at? Do we think that it's going to be beneficial to try to drill down on that and maybe make that another signature project, if you will, something that will benefit everybody going forward?
I think I made the among some of this several months ago. I will take that responsibility. I would love to see that. Speaking from solid waste district perspective, we've gone I direct Cuyahoga County Solid Waste District. We've gone to surveying. We have formers in that service Cuyahoga County, and we have gone to now taking staff time to send surveys on an annual basis to each of those MRFs, getting that information back, reading through it, trying to interpret it, going back to the MRF again. And it's a multi-month process. Some of the private sector is very responsive, others are a bit more reluctant. And this is all in trying to get that education out to our residents and our businesses. Because truly dependent upon who and in most areas, your hauler is also your recycling processor. There are those nuances. And I think if we can be more responsive to changes in technology, because I agree, MRFs are continuing to evolve, which is expanding the material we can all recycle, which is a tremendous thing. But we need to be able to communicate that to the general public so they can do their part. They just, we can't, we're still trying to communicate. Don't look at the numbers on the bottom, look at the shape, those types of things. So I don't know if there is, and we would be as Solid Waste District happy to share our survey form. It's just a spreadsheet. But, if it could somehow be collected from each of the MRFs, and I think annually, I think anything greater than that is going to be a tremendous burden for the MRFs. But, for example, Waste management in our area is about ready to open a brand new MRF. Their capabilities are going to be different than the MRF they have in Akron. I mean, and that's like spitting distance away. So to be able to get this information from each of those MRF facilities that can then go back to the districts, or even just be, it could be, I know you're going to hate this, Chad, it could be on the OE community website. But it's transparency. It just, education, or what do you do? How do you do it? And I'll be fine. I would be in support of it.
So, Mr. Chairman, just not to interrupt, but I will. So we on an annual basis do what we call a big box store MRF survey, and this had to do with MRFs who have multi-county exposure. And so we gather that information. It's more general than what you're talking about, but we gather that information, and then they do wonderful things to it, and they spit it back out in solid waste districts and say, here, include this into your report, blah, blah, blah. So you don't inundate, Eric or Jeff at Rumpke or whoever we're talking about with several, surveys from different entities. It just makes it more convenient. And I think Ohio EPA would be more than willing, I think our folks would be more than willing to try to add to what we already do by providing some kind of standardized request from the MRFs. But I don't think that what we send to them now is what you're looking for. It's not as specific as what you need. And so we would need to work maybe with a group of members, like a subcommittee of MAC, come up with a standardized reporting form, for lack of better words, that you would be able then to draw that information and use it in your education and awareness. However your communication system is set up. We would obviously, like solid waste district representation on there, we want MRF representation on there because those are the two primary components that we're looking at here and asking for and from. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, what I'm saying is we're more than happy to work with a subcommittee of your choosing with that representation component to it to kind of come up with something that makes sense as far as being able to collect the information and then communicating that to all the districts that fall in that category. But Steve, you may have.
Yeah, we'll go bomb right in the middle.
Okay.
That can happen. I think we can do that. Here's the issue I think that happened in Northern Ohio. You have, and I'll use company A, B, and C. Company A says, I'm going to come onto the market. Go with me, Eric.
I'm with you.
You're okay. Company A says, we've developed a relationship with a market to add a new product to our material list. It's confirmed. We've been there. They can utilize it. We want to add that to our list.
Right.
Company B says, we're not doing that yet. We don't have that on market. Company C says we don't have it. So this causes a problem for a solid waste district because they're trying to put general information out to say, here's our material list. When you've got one oddity over here saying, oh, we're going to add this other product that we now have a market for. So we have an issue there. I think that's where some of these problems can begin. And how do we work that out? Because I'm aware of another program that's getting ready to come on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to, it's going to cause a problem, I think. But it's something we need to do. But it's going to be an issue where it's going to be done on a pilot project in a geographic area. And I think Ohio's going to see one. And so I think the question I would throw back at the solid waste district is, how do you have the flexibility to say, one company's going to take these, and the other thing that you and I have talked about, and I talked to Michael about this, is you have a contract term that changes. So sometimes your contract term, you don't change those products until that contract term rolls over, and you add another product to that. So that's another issue. So it's not it's easy at your level where you all get together and we say, we're going to do this, but then all of a sudden you get on the street with it, and these products start coming. And how do we incorporate those into the process?
That's right.
I know.
You know, our job
I know
is to
that-
differentiate ourselves from the other companies, right? How do we make ourselves special? And I think what makes it confusing is for us to make ourselves special and maybe appealing in certain areas. To Steve's point, we invest in different technologies to allow us to tap into other markets. And then you have to roll over the contract and things change, right? So I think we don't want to work in a commoditized industry, but we are, right? So we're trying to figure out a way to make ourselves snowflakes. And that's really what that's the problem.
And we, as a district, I'll talk specifically about Cuyahoga County. The way we responded to that is, and again, I understand that not every solid waste will be able to do this. We changed our website in order to create that flexibility. So for example, in Cuyahoga County, you can go to our website, choose your community or choose the commodity now. And let's start with community, it's the easier one. You can choose your community. It will, when you click on that, display all of the commodities that are handled by that community, which also takes into effect those terms or contracts. Or if you click on a commodity, it will tell you which of the MRFs take that. So it's kind of a reverse. Now, I absolutely understand. I would not expect our other sister districts, because that took us a year and a lot of gray hair. But the thing is, at least it would be, I think the ways you don't want to have Joe resident going back to the district saying, hey, I happen to call company A and their customer service told me they take, 1 through 7, items. And, but your site only says they take 1 through 5. And so I think even if the information was there, at least that empowers the solid waste district in whatever form they can manage to consume that information and get it pushed out, even if it's as simple as being a pass through to the individual community or the individual business. Because it does affect businesses too.
Yeah, I think upstream, we need those members. I think clearly there needs to be a subcommittee on this because I think we all want it. It's an opportunity for private folks in this world to advertise the great things that they're doing.
Absolutely.
And I think if we can get feedback from some other organizations, we can look upstream with that. So I think it's an excellent idea.
And then a communication director. And I know that the Rumpke, I've already talked to Command Pratt. I said, would you be willing to sit on something? Because she needs to hear that. If they're calling customer service in another area, which they do, they don't sit in these cities, by the way.
Right.
They're calling a place maybe in Cincinnati for a question is complete. They've got to be giving standard answer. But that really, your clients are just, I'm hearing things.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Well, we've got call centers that are usually the ones that get them.
Yeah.
I mean, even if your own information isn't right, which is possible.
Because I put on my solid waste hat, very frustrating communication. All of us have a similar goal. We're dealing with contract cycles. We're dealing with mixed messaging. We're dealing with commodities that change, and having a method that's flexible would be helpful. I'm not sure how that impacts contracts. I'm not sure. All I know is we are oftentimes stuck with old commodity and existing contracts.
So just for clarification purposes, because I'm not in this world, everybody keeps talking about these contracts. So let me see if I can put this together. You have a contract. It says you're supposed to recycle commodities A, B, C, and D. Okay. You're not allowed to accept anything except for A, B, C, and D in that community.
generally, unless we go to the city and the city agrees to amend the contract to add another product. But generally, it goes to the end of the term of the contract.
So why would anybody say don't put that in there if you guys can recycle it? I don't understand.
Well, you have a fragmented program. The education component gets fragmented because you're thinking, well, just throw that in. No, that's not in the contract. The contract says we're supposed to take these different commodities. It almost has to be that way, Michael, because you would have a very subjective program and you can just put things in there. That's when we get in trouble, contamination issues.
Yeah, now I want to recycle wood.
So as a solid waste district, we try to advise communities to ask the MRF what they process. We no longer suggest communities tell a MRF what they're going to take. The conversation needs to come back to the community based on the facility. Very similar to compost facilities. Although they're allowed to take compostable products, individual facilities make individual decisions on what they can take in. So we are educating on the other side of the city municipality side to ask the MRF and actually ask the MRF what happens to it. So you can evaluate if that is a method that you approve of in your process. But we're trying to reverse the conversation on the solid waste district side because we don't think you should tell MRFs what they take. That's just not a reality of the industry. It should be what they're able to divert. And that's how we're trying to help MRFs get that.
Well, I guess that's my point of, if you've got, I understand the idea of minimums. We want to make sure that you get A, B, C, and D. That's in there. But if recycling MRF A, B, C, or A, B, or C says I can take additional material, why wouldn't you let that MRF decide what additional material they can take? And then figure out a method to advertise that.
That's what she's doing.
Yes.
I think that's exactly what she's.
Something of the committee would be to have language that would help in those service agreements that would allow for that flexibility. But it works the other way as well, sometimes they can't. Oh, so you know, it's gotta go both ways. But I think tying somebody to a multi-year based on commodities is something we are trying to educate our communities not to do. We're trying to have a 6 month or a year conversation. So it's reflective of what's actually being diverted. It has to actually be recycled.
That's important.
Well, and
That's another aspect of this.
correct. What we've gone to is similar to Marcy in the contracts we have with our communities, well, businesses for that matter, craft. There's a sheet that the hauler processors to complete. It's to list what can they take. And then we've also asked them what their end markets are, to get some idea of the stability of those end markets. And the contract terms are shortening too. I mean, there aren't 10-year contracts out there anymore, or 7-year. Our average contract is 3 years with 2 1-year extensions because of that ever-changing environment. And as a bid response, then we've had a couple of communities based on what that particular material recovery facility is doing end market wise with a commodity, make their decision based on that. As Marcy said, they may find that they want to go down path A versus path B, and regardless of price, because they feel that that's more supportive of a certain direction.
And Michael, it's not as, you may look at it as restricting to have a defined list, but that also puts a requirement that the solid waste district can assure their clients and customers, residents, that this material is being recycled. I don't know if you knew the solid story where one of the news outlets put a GPS tracker and they found out that this material ended up in a landfill. That's what stops that. That contract doesn't allow us as the processor to do that.
I get the minimums. I get the minimums. And that should be there. But I guess the bottom line is, I don't know if we're kind of hogging the conversation here. I don't know if anybody's got anything on the other side of the room, but the idea is that everybody wants it. Figure out how to do something.
Well, I think we're doing something, but maybe in bringing the right more people. I think the communications people need to be brought in. I think that I know the one, Amanda Pratt, is willing to come to here to do a 10-minute presentation on how they do things, or what the other communications, the companies can. I know Eric's got his relationship too, so we can talk, we can elevate the discussion.
So let's see if we can get a subcommittee together.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I know that, Marcy and Beth are great representatives. We might include a couple other solid waste districts, first of all. So we want to include the communications people. Want to make sure the other two main haulers, besides Waste and Republic, are invited. I know this gets to be a big committee here. And then a couple representatives from those who generate or sell a product, soft drink association, retail merchants. I think they need to be included, bring that perspective of, hey, new products come online all the time and we work, blah, blah, blah. So I think if we can maybe run a list by you to see what you think as far as the composition of that subcommittee, and if we get your thumbs up, then we'll start reaching out to people and say, let's have an initial conversation about what is the lay of the land right now. Tell us what happens right now and tell us the results of the way it is, and good and bad. And then everybody get on the same page at that point.
Do you think that including the recycling partnership in this conversation would be of benefit? Or just not yet?
I gotta pay him somehow.
You do or
I have
not?
to pay him.
I don't know. They
You have
took our
an opinion?
program and they sold it to
Okay.
somebody else. Maybe they'll figure out they want to participate. And we'll get a little goodwill.
Well, Dan and Marie have a lot of money, but I mean,
They don't want to spend their money.
I mean, we can ask. We can ask, that's for sure.
There's some
I don't-
public mercs I think would be helpful too. There's some public statistics that run public merc.
Yeah.
They're a great conversation. I think they'd be a huge asset to that conversation.
We'll run a list by you.
Okay. We're getting close to the end. I don't
Are you
have,
gonna push yourself? I mean, are you gonna push your conversation to the next time?
I'm happy to do it.
Great idea.
It's just to keep in mind that this is the year that we're supposed to do the state plan review. We're supposed to do it every 3 years. We did kind of a mini one last year. So, we just need to make a decision about how it is we want to go about doing this. Do we want to use last year's mini and build on it a little bit? Do we need a formal report? We just need to get through the requirement. We're not actually required to start at this point in time because it's within 3 years, which would be November. But so the idea here today was just to get you thinking about how in-depth you think we need to do, what kind of discussions you want to have, and then what kind of information you need to have available for the review. So, yes,
One other thing before we close, I just wanted to mention.
you're going to say you don't want to do it, right?
No, this is kind of off subject, but you ask us periodically for new programs and things for these meetings. I just attended last month the ribbon cutting of Rumpke for the new recycling center on Joyce Avenue. And it was eye-opening. This is going to be the largest recycling center in North America. And so if there's a program to be had, maybe the video that they presented ought to be shown to this committee because it's amazing and how they're including.
Well, Paul, we know a guy, we might be able to get a hold of that video.
Yeah. They're actually including a lot of the neighborhoods in some of the appointments there. So hats off to them.
So to that point, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we will not push Ernie off the next meeting, I promise. It does have to get started.
Well, we're into this one, so if we don't push me to the next one, then I guess I don't have to do it.
I know that he and Lindsay are also working on the format 4.2 with, there's a subgroup of solid waste districts, and we'll talk about that at the next meeting. In walking over here, I met up with Kimberly, who asked the question, why are we always have the meetings here? And the simple answer is the county commissioners have been very good to us.
It was
Good-
not a
good
complaint, by
group
the
of
way.
folks.
I love it.
You know,
I was just curious.
Yeah, don't complain.
From a township perspective, we like our county commissioners. So, but if the group would like to stay within Central Ohio and maybe have a meeting somewhere else and see something at the same time, we can do that. I mean, my first thought is Rumpke's Resource Center there on Fifth Avenue. Now, obviously that building won't be built by May, but you can see the old facility or the current facility right now. If we could start to maybe get you out places where you can see certain things happening, we can make that happen as well, but also have a meeting at the same time. So, but it's your choice, you and your council's choice.
Were you suggesting that we go on a field trip?
I love field trips and I am very excited about Rumpke's new work. To Chet's point, it won't be open by May, but it's been a couple of years since I visited, and I recently visited with my friends at the Wholesale Beer and Wine Association, and they had never seen it. And talk about contamination and the importance of, what Rumpke and Waste Management are trying to do to cut down on it. In living color, you can see those efforts, and you can see the potential for new sorting equipment and the really intentional work they do to try to squeeze every ounce of recyclables they can. But we have a lot of work to do educating the public about bowling balls, plastic bags, deer carcasses. Yeah, it's a lot. That shouldn't be in.
But to your point, Kimberly, it's funny because I remember when I visited the Murph in Cincinnati, a gentleman had called complaining that he threw away his Cincinnati Bengals tickets. And he wanted somebody to go through the file to find them. And the guy was like, dude, I'm telling you, you cannot find them. And you just looked out the window and it was all right there. And it was like, just the public just doesn't understand. They haven't seen it. And if you haven't seen it in person, that's correct. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, the scale is crazy. But I love field trips. I love things that are, just. I am very excited about this group too. I mean, years ago, a permutation of this group used to just, no offense to Ernie, but just used to do a lot of group math, writing that solid waste plan, and it was horrible.
It wasn't,
It was honest.
it was me.
I felt bad for you because it was agonizing. And we never got to these really substantive discussions. So I want to compliment everybody in this room for, chipping in on discussion. This is a very big kitchen table. We can talk about hard things and still like each other.
So I guess with that, we will work on a field trip this year.
Yes.
And if we don't like it, we can all blame Kim.
I can bring snacks. Good luck.
But I think it, to your point, it may help us as we look at the state solid waste management plan, because that is one of our primary charges, is to make sure that we're on track with that and make sure we understand how we're supporting that, and then go on down through the rest of the things that we're supposed to be trying to help with, including putting people together that normally don't talk and think they get along, which I think is one of the most important things that we can do. So,
just email me, Kelly, give me some suggestions for stuff she would like to see. Send me an email for what you need or would like, or your ideas for the review, or where to take it so that I can be prepared for.
Ernie, it may be beneficial to us to do a reminder, maybe PowerPoint presentation. Maybe you've already done it.
I did one last year that I can forward you what we looked at from last year. I mean, a lot of the state plan isn't relevant anymore, so certain sections of it, there really isn't much to do, but we're really talking about the goals, the market development plan, and then the state strategy.
Well, and I'm talking about just like that, even go through some of the sections that aren't important, so you can just kind of breeze through them and just know what that whole thing is. We spent almost a year on it the first time. We don't need to do that again. Some of us have seen it and are aware of it and that kind of thing. But at least for those of us that weren't available or involved in that original conversation, we can breeze through that, and then maybe we can have another conversation next time. We'll put a little higher up on.
Oh, I'm fine at the end.
You're going first next time.
Okay. So just because we're at the end of the agenda, I just want to make sure to find out from guests who are participating virtually if anybody wanted to address MAC at this point. So if you do, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. I think that's, everybody's probably as hungry as we are. So, and Kimberly, I just want to say, I'd love to hang out with the Beer and Wine Association group. So, I'll bet they're a fun group.
Our guys are fun. Their guys are maybe slightly more. Don't tell my employers. A little bit.
So, since we don't have anybody who wants to address MAP, we're at the end of our agenda.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lunchtime.
It's like the grill. It's slowly looking. They probably.